Okay, conference. Thank you, everybody. Welcome back. I hope you've taken the time to have a hug, and if you've got a significant other here, something else as well. I'd just like to hand over now to our General Secretary, who's going to introduce our next guest.
Good morning, conference. It's my pleasure to introduce Bridget Phillipson to you this afternoon, the Shadow Secretary of State for Education. Bridget grew up in Washington in the Northeast. I'm told you read history at university, Bridget, and you actually had a couple of proper jobs before you came into politics as well at Sunderland City Council and in a refuge for victims of domestic violence, so always doing good. You've been MP for Houghton since 2010. And I think it's fair to describe you as a bit of a rising star in the party, having been opposition whip on the Public Accounts Committee, Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, and now promoted to Shadow Secretary of State for Education. And the one thing about education is we see politicians on their way up, and sometimes, unfortunately, on their way down as well. But you're clearly on your way up, and we'll be lucky to have you fighting for better education while we've got you in that position. You're very welcome at this conference. I was really pleased when you contacted me almost immediately after your appointment to be Shadow Secretary of State for Education to show just how important you see school leaders and how important you see the NAHT are to developing Labour policies and the Labour's approach to education. We are a fiercely independent, a politically independent trade union, but we would want to build a very positive relationship with Labour, and you're very welcome here today to tell us about your plans.
Thank you to Paul, to Tim and to Paul for making me feel so welcome here today, and it is wonderful to see you all back here in person. Paul, I want to pay tribute to you to begin with for your leadership, not just of the union, but right across education. Month after month, you have been a constructive voice for heads, for schools, and for, above all, for our children. Conference, you are very lucky to have him. In the years to come, when we look back on these extraordinary last 2 years, NHS workers, both in our country and across the world, who develop vaccines so fast, will deservedly get much of the praise. But alongside them, there should be a proud place for all those who work in our schools and nurseries. Head teachers, senior leaders, teachers, teaching assistants, and indeed all of the support staff. It is you who have kept our young people going through extraordinary and difficult circumstances, who have supported their well-being, stepped in when free school meals were not being delivered, undertaken safeguarding checks for the children most at risk, moved lessons online, provided technology for those without, helped your staff rise to challenge after challenge, supported the most vulnerable, turned your schools into testing centres, dealt with the chaos of pandemic-era government policy on early years and nurseries, kept going when staff absences got above 10, 20 or even 30% in some cases, and provided stability and comfort, not just for families, but so often for your teachers and staff. In a time without precedent, it has been the school leaders who have stepped up. You have absorbed the stress of the community, comforted bereaved families, provided a safe space for reflection, and through it all, given every teacher and every group of children the best chance of continuing to learn. You deserve our heartfelt thanks. You have been true heroes. Thank you. And it's therefore to me a real sadness and a real frustration that the government has made your life so much more difficult and so much more stressful. By having to deal with a chaotic patchwork of promises and guidance, often at the last minute, often too late to preempt every school in the country having to make up their own policies. When clear, focused government leadership was needed in response to the pandemic, there was a vacuum. They have failed to support your leadership. They are failing our children. No plan, no direction, no ambition. And that lack of ambition is clear in everything they do. And it's even clearer in everything they fail to do. So when a clear, focused and ambitious plan for our children's recovery was needed, nothing. Sir Kevin Collins's plan was rejected out of hand by a Chancellor who told us he'd maxed out on support for our children. A generation is being failed by a Prime Minister whose promises are hollow and whose commitments meaningless. Time and again for this government, our children are an afterthought. But it doesn't need to be like this. If I'd been Secretary of State, then on the very day schools and nurseries closed to most children in March 2020, that was the day that I would have started work on 3 plans. First, an immediate plan to support children's learning and development remotely and as fully as possible while lockdown went on. An urgent plan to reopen schools safely and quickly, and once open, to keep them open so that our children could learn together and play together. And critically, a plan to ensure that when lockdown ended, children's education and well-being didn't suffer in the long run. Labour set out a very clear plan for how we would do that. And more than 2 years into the pandemic, we've still not seen a plan from the government to match ours. What we have is too little, too late, too fragmented, too badly delivered. Sir Kevin Collins resigned in despair. Who can blame him? Even the government can't bring themselves to call their programme a success. But while the government ducks the challenge, Labour would rise to it. We accept that responsibility. We would match, not temper, the ambition of our young people. If I were Secretary of State in a Labour government right now, you'd be seeing breakfast clubs and new activities for every child, more sport, music, drama, book clubs, to boost time for children to play and socialise after so many months away from their friends. Quality mental health support in every school, because at every school I visit, both teachers want it and need it now. Small group tutoring for all who need it, not the disastrous spectacle of the National Tutoring Programme delivering cut price, outsourced provision to empty classrooms. Proper professional development for teachers, so that after the toughest years of your careers, you get the support you need to succeed and to ensure that our children achieve and thrive. And another thing you'd be seeing right now, a real focus on the early years. We'd have pumped in investment, increasing the early years pupil premium more than 4-fold to drive up the quality, affordability and availability of provision. Early years childcare and education in this country is too often unaffordable, unavailable, inaccessible. The government is failing parents, failing providers and failing children. Because it's in those first few years that the attainment gap opens up for our children. It's the first chance to step in and help in the lives of children who desperately need that support. You see that in schools, when it happens, when it doesn't, and we all see that right across society. In Power, Labour acted decisively to tackle that disadvantage, to support families and children and to close that gap. A generation grew up with Sure Start, with children's centres. A generation like me who was supported after 16 with education maintenance allowance. I saw in my own community the difference those changes made, and I see it in the lives of young people who grew up with that advantage, with the support it unlocked. 20 years later, the evidence around both the attainment and early intervention is clearer and stronger than it ever was even then. And yet, too many children don't all have the chances that they should have. Too many children arrive at school already behind their peers. And why is that? In these last 12 years, child poverty has soared. It was rising before the pandemic, and Conservative choices are making it worse almost every day. The cost of living crisis we face today is a crisis made worse in Downing Street. It is piling extra costs onto families and to children. Income tax thresholds frozen, council tax up, national insurance up, energy prices soaring, petrol costs through the roof, food prices up, universal credit support slashed. Again and again, we see this government making choices about taxation, about spending, and about action that mean less money and less support for working people and their children. The government, through its own choices, is driving the inequality which disfigures our society, damages our economy, and fails our children. And we all see that inequality gets worse as the years go on. Too many parents can't afford breakfast clubs, after-school clubs, extra activities. For too many parents, the cost of those activities is more than they earn in that time, denying children the opportunities and activities that complement classroom teaching, that give children the chance to play with friends and enjoy their learning, and which build resilience and social skills, the building blocks of a happy childhood. That ongoing failure on childcare means the attainment gap gets worse. That is exactly what the Conservatives should be tackling, and it's exactly what Labour would be tackling. Because you will all know that attainment gap. You see it every day. Nurseries see it opening up right at the start of children's lives. Primary schools see it already wide when children arrive at 4 or 5. You see it stubbornly staying put or widening as the years roll on. You see in the communities that you live and work in the consequences that has for children themselves, for their families, for our society. The pandemic didn't cause it, though it did make it worse. A decade of political choices did. The issues of attainment, behaviour and attendance don't start and stop at the school gate. Supporting children at school is not a responsibility that stops when children get home. The government's choices are making life harder for children, for families and for staff in your schools. And this failure to rise to the challenge, this poverty of ambition, this absence of any vision for our future, that was never clearer than in the Conservative Schools White Paper we saw last month. I know from having spoken to many of you that your reaction will have been the same as mine. Is that it? Is that really it? Is that the limit of their ambition for our children? The White Paper and the SEND Review were devoid of ideas. A commitment to teach the hours most schools already do. A commitment to support kids failing behind, as teachers already do. And a target quickly downgraded to an ambition for more children to hit literacy and numeracy benchmarks. But no plan, no means of delivery. Ambition without those resources, without those plans, is hollow. On the real challenges facing our children, our schools and our leaders: standards, attainment, tackling disadvantage, skills, recruitment, retention, improving morale in the profession, encouraging more people to move up to headships. On all of these, near silence. To me and to Labour, education is about opportunity. The government's role must be to empower and enable all our children with those opportunities. All our children, every child. Because to me, all of this is deeply personal. I remember my childhood under a different Tory government. I grew up in the North East in the 1980s. My mum brought me up alone at a time when families were judged not on the love that they gave, but on the shape that they had. When government thought it more important to criticise us than to support us, and while schools struggled to provide even the basics. I remember the difference it made to have teachers and school leaders who believed in me and my friends at a time when the government didn't. And my life has been a lesson in the power of education, through great primary and secondary schools and onto university. And I look back now and feel how fortunate I've been. Not every child at every school had those chances. They didn't then, and they certainly don't now. And when I talk with parents, and when I talk with teachers and heads, I'm always struck how the ambition children have is so often matched by their families, so often matched by their schools, and yet so rarely matched by the government we have today. All that needs to change. So to me, looking across education, the most important question is, why is it like this? They've had enough time to implement any vision they might have had. 12 years into Conservative government, and a whole generation of our children have grown up to a drumbeat of that failure. Why does the government not focus more on the attainment gap? Why does the government care so little about the soaring cost of childcare, both in the early years and for older children, whose school day doesn't always fit around parents' working days? Why does the government provide so little early intervention and support to the families who need it most, storing up problems for children, for families, for schools and for all of us? Why did the government bring forward a white paper so shockingly thin, so devoid of ideas and so hollow? Why is the government's special educational needs and disability review been so long delayed? And why has it taken so long to even acknowledge the problems that they have themselves created? Why is the government's thinking on schools about hours, pledges, structures, and not about making the most of childhood and about standards and improvement? To me, the answer seems clear. The government doesn't just lack ideas for childcare, for schools, for colleges, for skills, for universities. It's far worse than that. There's a huge gap where there should be a vision for families, for children and for our young people. They lack any sense of what it should mean to grow up in this country, what it should mean to have been through our schools, not simply as the workforce of the future, but as the citizens of that future. Because schools aren't simply about bringing on the individuals of tomorrow, but shaping the society of tomorrow. Let me be clear. A Labour government will be relentless in the focus of pursuit of excellence in education. A rich and broad understanding of what education means is not one which lacks ambition for our children to excel. But excellence isn't just about the numbers and letters with which we leave school. It's about how ready young people are for work and for life, how well placed they are to pursue their dreams, to live in a world transformed by technology, for life in all its richness, for relationships and for families of their own. And many of you will know well the immense and valuable breadth of the early years curriculum, rich, stimulating, well-balanced. But we need to keep that throughout a child's journey through education. As things stand, the curriculum narrows, and false choices, children who achieve against children who thrive, children with knowledge against children with skills are the basis for that narrowing, and I have no time for these false choices. I make no apology for being determined to see young people achieve academically, but just as important, I want to see them thrive in life. Supporting children to develop the literacy and numeracy skills they need is central to education, and so is supporting them to become ambitious, resilient, creative, confident young people who enjoy music, arts, sport and culture. As someone who loves studying history, I celebrate the incredible work of our teachers and lecturers who bring knowledge alive for the next generation. Knowledge is essential, but so is the ability to apply that rich knowledge to the real world. That's why Labour would reform the citizenship curriculum, embed digital skills throughout their learning, so that children and young people learn communication, collaboration and problem-solving skills and understand the difference that they can make, the role they can play, so that when children come to leave education, they're ready for work and ready for life. We achieve things best, as the pandemic taught us well, not in isolation from one another, either as people or as a country, but by working together, by challenging, by criticising, by cooperating, and by collaborating. These are the skills that some parents have always been able to secure for their children. The difference a Labour government will make is to secure them for every child. That is why Keir Starmer has announced Labour's Council of Skills Advisors, to support us enabling you to give every young person the rounded education that I know you want them to see. One that instills a love of learning, while equipping young people with the skills that they need to thrive at work and throughout life. And Labour would go further to deliver this. We will be delivering a national excellence programme for schools, paid for by ending the tax exemption for private schools. It will mean a teacher recruitment fund to recruit and train over 6,500 new teachers, filling vacancies and skills gaps. Establishing an excellence and leadership programme to support new head teachers throughout their first years on the job, ensuring that teachers thinking of making that step up know that they will be supported to succeed. And a teacher development programme to enable all leaders and teachers to access continuing professional development. I am very clear that investment in our young people means investment in you. And because we want schools to do better, We need to know where to support we need to know where the support to achieve that belongs. Which schools, which parts of the system, which areas. And that brings me to inspection. But conference, it is time for Ofsted to turn a corner. To be supportive of the role of inspection is not to believe that it cannot be better. The Ofsted of tomorrow will be very different from the Ofsted we needed 30 years ago. And too often I hear from too many heads that the way inspections now operate make you feel punished rather than supported. Getting the best out of people means respecting their professionalism, means supporting improvement, as well as challenging performance. Ofsted should be the champion of every head who excels and every school that enables children to succeed. And it should be the ally of every teacher and every leader determined to set their school on the path to success. But to make that a reality, we need two things: a vision for what inspection is for, and powers and practices to fit the educational landscape of today and tomorrow. Labour is clear what inspection is for. For children, to ensure they get the start they deserve, the chance to achieve and thrive. For schools, for heads and for teachers to learn and develop, ensuring they are supported to deliver those opportunities every child needs. And for parents, so we have independent and trusted information about our child's school. For the system as a whole, that every locus for supporting our children is accountable and improving, with multi-academy trusts properly responsible for provision within schools. So a clearer focus on the schools that need extra support to improve. And we need inspections of every part of the school system that can be a force for change. Inspections where the intensity of the experience is reasonable and proportionate, that point heads and teachers to the support they need to improve, that consider the broad context for schools and recognise where change is being made, that celebrate what's great as well as identify what's not. That is the inspection Labour will ensure you see in your schools. Our schools need to succeed because our children must succeed, and Labour's priority will be the success of every child. I believe that Britain should be the best country in the world for children to grow up. And that is not just something to which we aspire, but which we will work every day to achieve. As Keir Starmer has said, education is Labour's top priority. And to make that a reality means more than simply standard-length school days and uniform government arrangements. It means vision, and it means ambition. Vision for the society, the childhood and the economy of the future. Ambition not just for some of our children, some of our young people, but for all of them. Recognising the value and worth of every single child. Under Labour, schools will be at the centre of how government enables and empowers every child from every family to acquire not just the knowledge and skills, but also the confidence, resilience and ability they need. Schools should be the engines of opportunity for our young people and our country. Because in a word, education is about opportunity for each of us, for all of us, and all through our lives. I grew up at a time when government didn't believe that, though I was lucky enough to go to schools that did. But life should not come down to luck. Every child deserves that opportunity. Labour has that ambition, that vision, that determination to see all of our children succeed and our country succeed. The challenge for me, the challenge for you and for all of us is to make the change we need the reality we see. Thank you.
Thank you, Bridget. Thanks for being with us. We've now got some questions. So can I ask Darren Gelder to come up to the mic? Questioners, you do have a right of reply, but not for a supplementary question. So you can wait by the microphone if you would like to follow up on anything that Bridget says on the topic you raised. Thank you. Darren.
Shadow Secretary Conference, Darren Gelder, proud and privileged to be a head teacher in Solihull. The question that I've got is, what would Labour's approach be to supporting school leaders with the ever-increasing burden of additional non-educational roles and responsibilities that we find are daily adding up and adding up?
Brilliant. Is that okay? Yeah, brilliant. Thanks very much. Thanks, Darren. I think, first of all, I would just want to reiterate my thanks for everything that you and other school leaders have done that went way beyond what would ever have been expected of you. I know it perhaps wasn't what you came into to teaching or to headship to do, but you know, you've done it with, you've set up testing centres, you've done, gone above and beyond, and a big thank you. But you are right. I want to see our school leaders focused on making sure that every child gets a great education, that you can work to make sure that teachers are focused on what matters most in the classroom. Some of what we've set out already is around making sure that we have a qualified mental health professional in every school, able to give extra support to children and young people. We also want to see careers guidance delivered by professionals within school as well, so to make sure that we've got that extra help there now. I mean, that does also take us to that wider question of the need to provide extra help coming out of the pandemic. And Labour's Children's Recovery Plan would provide that extra support that you would need right now, particularly to deliver on supporting our children as they try and recover that lost time and development.
Okay, thank you. I think one of the things that we've heard at conference over the last days and people feeling incredibly passionate about isn't just what's happening in schools. It's about the access to the third-party services, the mental health, the social workers, the police, the nurses, etc., that allow us to get on and do our job as educationalists. We have a role to play, but it is in partnership with other third-party agencies. What would Labour's response to be beyond the school? Thank you.
I agree entirely, and I see that time and again, both in my own community and when I visit schools. I mean, when Labour was in government, we obviously secured big investment in the early years with that extra early intervention that we need, because I appreciate that you and school leaders are asked to do an incredible amount to support families with facing real challenges in their lives, and you can't do everything. And you cannot separate out children's experiences at home and in the community from what they then take with them into school. So I can assure you that making sure we've got strong early intervention support, really strong early years provision, will be at the heart of Labour's thinking coming up to the next general election.
Thank you.
Thank you, Darren. Roger Blackburn. Roger.
Good morning, Shadow Secretary Conference. Roger Blackburn, and I'm representing Salford branch. With the recent education white paper, the spotlight has been thrown back on academies and academisation. What would Labour do about academisation, forced or otherwise, if they form a government at the next election?
I want every child to be able to go to a great local state school, and I think particularly coming out of the pandemic, my focus would have been making sure that schools were properly supported to allow all of our children to make up for that time they've spent away and all of the difficulties that they're currently facing. I would not be focused on the issues around structures that the government have sought to reopen once more. I don't think it should be the priority, not least given everything our children have been through, everything that you have been through. And when I look to the numbers of teachers who are leaving the profession, I think we need to urgently address that as well. I mean, I do not know the landscape that we will yet inherit. As you'll all doubtless be aware, the timetable around much of this is quite far into the distance, and the general election is perhaps a little closer than that. So it's not entirely clear what that structure will look like. But I'm far more interested in what goes on in the classroom, how we support our teachers and leaders, than I am about the name above the door.
And the role of the local authority, how would Labour see that going forward?
I think we do need to look again at the role for local authorities right across the board. So many of the challenges that local communities will face can only be addressed by greater collaboration. Schools working together, but also a clear role for local authorities. So I think there is more that's needed there too.
Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. Lisa Jones.
Good morning, Conference, and welcome, Shadow Secretary of State of Education. My name is Lisa Jones. I'm a school business manager and the Treasurer for Thurrock within the Eastern region. I'd like to put to the Shadow Minister, the evidence shows that schools have experienced a 13-year real terms freeze on funding, and NAH's own data shows that the cost of schools are increasing rapidly. What would Labour Party do to address this?
Well, you'll know far better than me the challenges that school budgets are under right now. And of course, that has been exacerbated by the growing pressures that we're seeing around inflation and energy bills, for example. But actually, you'll know that going into the pandemic, schools were not in a strong position. I think it shows a very limited ambition from the government to only seek to get school budgets per pupil back to 2010 levels by 2024. I mean, we would also, and we made education a priority from government, we made sure that schools were properly resourced in their core budgets to deliver what's needed. But also, our children's recovery plan is very closely aligned with the plan set out by Sir Kevin Collins that would allow schools not to have to worry about how they're going to spend money on those catch-up programmes that I know many schools are doing anyway because they know it's necessary, when they've already had to spend lots of extra money on cleaning and on other COVID-related costs. So our children's recovery plan would allow for much of that to be offset with a real focus on how we can support our schools to make sure that children do get those extra activities, that small group tutoring, that mental health support. But I do accept the need for sustainable funding for all of our schools so that you can plan.
Thank you. Just, you said last year that the long-term outcomes are better delivered when they're planned on a longer-term basis of more than one financial year at a time. What do you believe to be a longer-term basis? Is more than 1 year 5 years? Because it seems, from my point of view, it would be ideal for schools to be able to plan for at least 3 years on a more certain basis, which would be in line with the statutory returns that we have to do on the forecasting. And with the pandemic and other things that are thrown into the mix, it's difficult really to plan with a certain, you know, exactly what we need to do.
No, I think that's right. And, you know, from government, when Labour was in power, we often secured through the spending review process, multi-year settlements, often on a 3-year basis, that would allow for that longer-term planning for schools. You need to have the ability to look at where you need to be in a few years and to be able to plan accordingly for that. I think what's also been difficult, as you'll know, for many schools is that sometimes it's not entirely clear whether costs to be met from existing budgets or whether extra funding will be forthcoming, and the government have flipped and flopped around some of that. So I do appreciate the need for stability as much as is possible, and I'm confident that Labour from government under Rachel Reeves as our Shadow Chancellor would want to make sure that all of our public services can be on a stable footing to make decisions for the long run, because we know we face big demographic challenges as well, and the need to plan ahead for our public services. So I think you make a point very well there.
Lovely. Thank you for your time.
Thanks.
Thank you. John Barr.
Good morning, Shadow Secretary of State and Conference. You've hinted in one of your replies at the landscape I'm about to describe. Leaders in schools described the recent months in 2022 as being the hardest term of the hardest academic year they've known. What policies have the Labour Party proposed that will reverse this threat to the recruitment and retention of school leaders in England's state schools?
Yeah. Absolutely. And, you know, I hear it myself from school leaders in my own community, and I see it myself with my own kids at school, and I know how hard it is and how hard it has been, and I don't think you've had enough recognition and support for the work that you've been doing keeping our communities going. So I've said it again, but thank you for what you've done to really support families through a desperately difficult time. What concerns me when I do visit schools around the country and speak to existing heads is they obviously want to be well supported in the work that they do, but they want to make sure that next generation of school leaders is coming through too. And they share concerns with me about how that's more difficult because of the pressures that they're currently facing. I think one aspect of that is around Ofsted, and I touched on that in my speech earlier. I appreciate that for many of you it can sometimes feel like a cat and mouse game, where you're not properly supported and where, you know, leaders will tell me the risk of one bad inspection, the fear around that being career ending. And I don't think we've got the balance right in all of that. In addition to that, we've set out our leadership programme for heads and for leaders to allow you all to have more time away from the school to take on new learning, develop new skills, and to make sure that you've got the support that you need. So I think it's about properly supporting our existing generation of school leaders, but actually looking to the future as well, because we need to make sure we've got people coming through, and that is, to me, a big worry.
I guess my response is going to be actually just thank you for coming here to open that conversation. I have to say, in contrast to the current Secretary of State, who decided not to come to us, even though he came quite close, we understand, yesterday. But what I would also really ask you to do is keep coming back to us in opposition and keep coming back to us when in government, because I think we need to keep talking, and I'm going to be honest, you need to hear from this conference and our school leaders. So thank you very much.
Absolutely, and I do want to hear from you, and I want to work with you. We might not always agree on absolutely everything, but I do want to have that honest dialogue with you all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. Lorna Legg.
Hello, conference, and hello, Shadow Secretary. And I echo what John just said in terms of thank you for coming and actually listening to us. My question is, what is Labour's policy on equality in the curriculum? Would there be a shared national approach rather than schools having to invent this on their own?
I think we need a school curriculum that inspires and supports every young person. I think that should be our starting point. And I think children should expect to see their lives, their communities, their experiences reflected in that. I think it is not for Secretaries of State to dictate which books should or shouldn't be taught within a school. I think you all have expertise and professionalism that allows you to deliver that well. But I do think we need to have a balanced approach right across the curriculum to make sure that all young people feel that there is something for them there, and that their lives, their families and their experiences are properly reflected in the work that they're undertaking at school.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lorna. Paul, did you want to say a few words?
Just very quickly, just to add.
The microphone.
Sorry.
I'm normally loud enough anyway, but just to quickly thank you again, Bridget, for coming. What struck me about your address, and in particular your answers to the questions, is the empathy that you already have with the profession and what our members face day in, day out. And your ability to have listened to what we've been saying since you've been in post and reflect back to us those concerns. Particularly, I was struck by your comments about Ofsted and the need for a proportionate accountability system and something that supports change and supports progress rather than being punishing in the way that you described it. So thank you very much for that. You've clearly listened to NAHT members as experts in education, and I look forward to working with you and trying to help you shape a policy that will take education forward for the country and everybody within the education system. So thank you very much for being with us today.
Yes, thank you, Bridget, from me. I believe it's now Paul will escort you from.
I'm going to escort Bridget off the premises to make
But
sure she
she's
doesn't
staying
steal the silver. Yeah.
But you are staying for lunch, I believe.
I am indeed, yes.
So I'm sure that some people might want to catch you, but we are a very friendly bunch. Look at the smiling faces out there this morning.
Should we go that way? It's short.
Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Okay. We're all going to shift up one space, so bear with us for 30 seconds or so. Okay, conference. So we are now back into the debate and policy making session, and we are going to continue on from where we left off at motions 7 to 9, which were on pay and conditions. So therefore, could we have, we've got Owen Rogers, it's funding of pay awards in Cymru, Owen Rogers and Tim Newbold.
Thanks, Paul. Good morning, conference. My motion is on the funding of pay awards in Wales. I'm representing Conwy. I accept that colleagues beyond Wales have their own very relevant issues, concerns and frustrations regarding non-existent pay uplifts or below inflation pay uplifts. This motion is all about fully funding uplifts. How on earth can school leaders honour pay awards when the money itself isn't forthcoming from government? Schools, as we all know, are already operating in the red or relying on grants simply to balance their current liabilities. Teachers in Wales have benefited from a 1.75% uplift despite a UK government public sector pay freeze. We're united in saying all public sector employees deserve a significant uplift after years of zero or below inflation rises. However, due to the complexities of school funding in Wales, some of that financial burden has been passed on to schools in some local authorities, despite the Welsh Government committing to the uplift being fully funded. By definition, this can only then be funded at the cost of resources for our children. Some local authorities funded, some part funded, and others provided no financial support. NAHT Cymru calls on National Executive to work with the Welsh Local Government Association to commit to a fully funded uplift and not pass on this financial burden to schools in some local authority areas, and for Welsh Government to use its influence to ensure its promise is kept. Conference, I move.
Thank you, Owen. Do we have anybody else who wishes to speak on this motion? No? In which case, supporting the pay there, could we, if you support this motion, could you raise your hand? And if against, that's unanimously carried. Thank you. Which takes us on to motion 8, closing the gender pay gap. Claire Evans is proposing that. Claire.
Good morning, Conference. My name is Claire Evans from West Midlands branch. In December 2021, the NHT, along with ASCL and the NGA and Women Ed, released the Gender Pay Gap report. A big shout out goes to our very own Morgan Flack and Natalie Arnett, who have filed multiple FOIs, crunched numbers, created countless spreadsheets to present the data for this sadly, utterly depressing report. Our General Secretary described this report as sobering, stating that for our female school leaders, there is almost a double hit in pay by the inequalities in the system. Within this report, we learn that male leaders in education earn on average a whopping 11.3% more than their female counterparts for doing the same job. The largest gap being in special or PRU academies, where on average men earn an additional £4,165 compared to their female counterparts for doing the same job. And this difference in salaries across all school leaders only widens with age and seniority across all state-funded schools. Women tend to have steadier increases in salary by age, whereas men tend to see much larger increases. The difference by the age of 60 and over reaches a staggering £17,334 for doing the same job. We also know that disabled women, women from Black, Asian and minority ethnic backgrounds can face additional pay penalties for doing the same job. You don't need to be great at depth in Year 6 to work out the mathematical pattern in this one. Women must be valued appropriately and equitably for the work that they do. In addition to being paid less, only 7% of women in education are likely to negotiate their initial salary compared to 57% of their male counterparts. I am one of this 7% of women who negotiated their initial salary. Get me, brazen. But I'm not brazen. The deep structural inequalities project me as this. Last May, when I was offered my first headship, the starting salary was advertised as less than the salary I was currently on as a deputy head teacher in a large inner-city primary school in Birmingham. But after interviews and tasks, it turns out the governors wanted me. I excitedly accepted the job. I couldn't believe how lucky I was. And then I asked via email if the governors would consider matching my pay to prevent me from losing money. I had an agonising wait of probably only about 24 hours, but I berated myself for being a money grabber. I couldn't sleep for the anxiety of being seen as being greedy or as being seen as a gold digger. But the story ends positively. The governors offered me not 1, but 2 points above the grade because they believed I was worth it. However, I am in the vast minority. The majority of women don't ask, and the majority of women don't get. So what do? We use the power of this union in a profession which has a female majority. But this isn't a case of boys versus girls and women versus men. This is everybody's issue. We're all on the same team. Men, you have a very important role to play in this, and I know from speaking to many of you that you want to help fix these inequalities. So, taking advice from the very fabulous Rennie Edo-Lodge, ask yourself, where do you hold influence in your life? You can diagnose that, and you can make that change. Conference, we are all equal, and we should be paid equally. We instruct National Executive to lobby government and employers to use the findings from the Gender Pay Gap report to eliminate these vast inequalities. Conference, I move.
Thank you, Claire. Do we have anyone else who wishes to speak? Oh, we shall wait for you to ascend. I should have brought my guitar, filled in.
Sorry, Julie Kelly, Hampshire. It was just to say this very much goes with small schools and small school heads. Majority do tend to be women. The men do tend to go to bigger schools. So what's happened in my area is that because I've had the confidence of NAHT and negotiated my pay, and then as a small school cluster, you realise that the other women hadn't done that. And so they've been coming to us, and my Chair of Governors has been supporting their Chair of Governors to do that. So it is a huge problem, and I think particularly amongst small schools too, but we've got to give them the confidence to be able to do this. Thank you. I support
Julie.
this.
I'm going to remember to introduce myself today. Hildy Mitchell, Brighton and Hove branch. I fully support this motion. I've just said to one of my colleagues I should have negotiated my pay, and she said we shouldn't have to. And she's absolutely right. The thing that I wanted to add to this is this structural inequality goes deeper than pay, and I'm sure that in our work to campaign for reducing, getting rid of the pay gap, we will be considering this. But in TES on Thursday, just as we were all coming to conference, the DFE published figures which show that not only do our female school leaders earn less, but they actually, female teachers are significantly less likely to become head teachers than their male counterparts. So we have, in primary schools in 2020, female teachers making up 85% of the workforce, but only 74% of head teachers. So I really hope that that will be part of our work, and I support this motion.
Thank you, Hildy.
Lorna Legg from Offwell in Devon. I just wanted to quote Paul Whiteman, Secretary of the NAHT, who said on Equality Pay Gap Day this year that leaders from a black, Asian or minority ethnic background risk facing a double hit in relation to pay as a result of inequalities in the pay system. So we have the issue of the intersectionality of being female and from a different or diverse background. So I think it would be important to acknowledge that perhaps in some way, because I think we need to make sure that equality across all of the protected characteristics don't become a barrier to us being able to go into headship and thrive in headship. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorna. I've just spoken to Magnus, and I think in taking this motion, we'll incorporate that, some sentiment. We haven't got a form of words for that, but we need to answer. That's fine.
Good morning, colleagues. Simon Kidwell, Cheshire Branch and National Executive. I just want to stand up because we needed a male, so go and speak up in support of this, but also to go and add on from Hildy's point that we need to look at those structural barriers which are stopping females going into leadership positions. And I think flexible working is absolutely key to this. So if we can make sure that we look at those barriers and make sure that flexible working is promoted across the female workforce and male workforce, but especially for females. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Okay, I see no one else waiting to speak, so we will... Oh, I beg your pardon. Keith.
I get the hint. Keith Wright, North West National Executive Member. Like Simon, I felt there were women coming up, and I'm thinking they shouldn't have to stand up and argue their case without representation across the board. So I stand with you, ladies, as a male head, with a senior team of 66% female leaders that I hope will be head teachers one day. It has to be equal. It's non-negotiable. Head teacher is the role. Whether it's head teacher, principal, whatever, it's the role, and the gender doesn't matter. So we stand with you. So fully propose that one.
Thank you, Keith. Right, now I see no one standing there. So I'll put it to the vote then. Those in favour, will you raise your hand? And those against? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you, Conference. Which takes us on to motion 9, which is fair pay in Northern Ireland, and the proposer is Liam McGuckin, and seconder Jerry Cameron.
That's a difficult one. My name, colleagues, is Liam McGuckin. I'm the president in Northern Ireland at the moment. And maybe it's my Catholic upbringing, but I feel like it's a confession. So I'm not sure I have to say, this is not my first conference. Okay. Probably not my last either, actually. Before proposing this motion, can I, as President in our region, take the opportunity to thank everyone in headquarters for their support over the last 2 years. If indeed there is something good to come out of the pandemic, it has brought us closer together with our colleagues in Wales, England, the Isle of Man and the Channel Islands. Members, like colleagues in other jurisdictions, we have seen our volume of work increase, funding going into our schools being diminished, open-ended hours contracts leading to principals working long hours, which seriously affect their home life and physical and mental health, increased expectations to be available over holiday periods, and an increased requirement for us to take on multiple roles such as accountants, social workers, marriage counsellors, HR managers, interpreters, and actually sometimes I think my parents think I'm an executive chef because I'm responsible for what's served in school meals, the colour of the pasta, how hard the rice is. And a couple of very strange stories come to mind, one with a very Northern Ireland context, but our role. But about a year ago, I live 1.2 miles from my school, which is not a good idea. But I drive along what's called the Shore Road, turn left, and on the first part of the road up to my school, there are a lot of flags come July, and I was talking to a member from Wales about this last night. Now, you get to the train line, and we only have 2 train lines in Northern Ireland, so it's quite a feat. And we pass onto the train line, and there's my school, and there are no flags, or as we call them, flags, in that area. Okay? And last May, June, I received a call from a parent to say, what was I doing about the flags? Now, I've done an honours degree, a master's degree, and a PQH, and I never saw a module to do with removing paramilitary flags. Okay, but that's what we're expected to have an input on. Another one is that actually the road floods at times underneath the bridge, and the water can be 4 or 5 foot deep if there's a really large flood. And again, I've received phone calls, what am I going to do about the flood? And I'm not Sylvester Stallone in Daylight. I can't dive in and remove the flood. But you know, it just shows what we're expected to do. There's increased accountability to boards of governors, parents and local authorities. And principals have become the main source of leading professional development in their schools and indeed for themselves as school leaders. And there's been less support from our education authority in all facets of school life. Yet at the same time, salaries of school leaders have been eroded in real terms Bills still need to be paid for gas, oil, mortgages, etc. That's before we think of the cost of bringing up a family. In Northern Ireland, school leaders have experienced real-term pay reductions of 22% since 2008. It's a disgrace to treat any worker in this way, but to treat the profession who makes such consistent learning provision for children and deal with complex pastoral care issues is truly appalling. Additionally, the failure to offer fair pay to school leaders is perceived by many members to represent a total lack of respect and significance. It is demeaning and derisory. We deserve better. We demand better. Colleagues, the profession has become less attractive to graduates, and even those who go into teaching are quickly changing profession to work for one of the many multinational companies that have opened up in Northern Ireland. Maybe it's a Northern Ireland thing, but many teachers are married or in a relationship with partners in the same profession. I'm not sure if it's the same here. My wife is a teacher, and I met her in college, and every Christmas I hear a fairy tale of New York recited to me. I could have been someone, and so could anyone. You took my dreams from me when I first met you. Okay? But seriously, in a household where both salaries are dictated by public service pay policy, the reduction in the real-life value of wages is exacerbated. Our politicians like to sit back and take credit for high-achieving results in Northern Ireland pupils attaining at GCSE and A level. This is because we have motivated teachers and well-led schools. If our politicians want continued good results, they need a motivated workforce, and the only way to maintain this is to offer the profession a competitive, career-long salary package. Colleagues, I call on you to back this motion and to restore fair pay to the education workforce in Northern Ireland, and indeed in all our jurisdictions. Conference, I move.
Thank you, Liam McGucking. Do we have anyone? Emily Prophet? No, you can come up the stairs. I should hasten to, and you can use the slope or the stairs.
I just wanted to stand here and support our Northern Ireland colleagues as an English head teacher. This isn't just an Irish problem, this is a national problem, and we welcome this motion. So thank you so much for bringing this to conference. I support this motion.
Thank you, Emily. How fast can you get up the slope?
It's a long old walk. Morning conference, Dean Taylor, NHT Cymru, Newport branch. I just wanted to come and support our colleagues in Northern Ireland. It's exactly the same situation in Wales, and I'm sure we just want to support the motion with them.
Thank you, Dean.
Good morning, conference. Sam Cooper, Jersey branch. We faced exactly the same situation in Jersey in 2019. We had 15 years of pay degradation, but with the support of the National Executive and rallying the troops in Jersey, we got the deal that we hope our colleagues in Northern Ireland are after. We support the motion.
Thank you very much.
Caroline Hoyle from Reading. What I didn't say earlier is that I'm a school business leader. So I support this motion, but also an increase in teachers' pay in all of our jurisdictions. But actually, we also need to get the funding for it. There is some concerning rhetoric going on about discussions around how teachers' pay and teachers' pensions are funding. In previous years, we have received, in England, a teacher's pay and a teacher's pensions grant separate to our core funding. We're now being told that this grant is paid within the national funding formula. I actually don't think it is. What I think it is a way of the government forgetting that it needs to properly and fairly fund these pay rises. I very much hope that teachers are going to see a significant pay rise very soon in recognition of all the hard work done during the pandemic and the amazing work done every day supporting our children. But the funding needs to arrive from the government to support it. School budgets are so squeezed that if there's anything more than a 1 or a 2% rise, I just don't think that schools are going to be able to pay it. So that is another factor in this. We must receive the funding as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Nigel Atwood from West Midlands. It's my first conference. I did a flash poll a little while ago on Twitter about school budgets and found out that over 60% are either in deficit or about to go in deficit. So I suggest an amendment that doesn't say Northern Ireland but says all regions. Because I think it's a fair pay offer for every single person who works in education. Thank you.
We're just consulting over the amendment there. Dave, speak.
Dave Woods, London Region and National Exec Member. Of course we'd support our colleagues in Northern Ireland. On National Exec, we listen time and time again of the awful situation that they've faced for many years, and we would also support our colleagues in Wales, the Channel Islands and Isle of Man. But for me, the key word here is about fair. In England, we're supposed to have an independent pay review body, which is supposed to listen to evidence and supposed to make a decision that would be a fair decision, taking account of the evidence. And yet, year after year after year, that independent body has been undermined because the government continues to set a ceiling in which the independent body can make a decision. That's not an independent pay body. That is a government-controlled pay body. If we want fair pay for all our public sector workers, and we want to restore the trust between public sector employees and government, we need to make sure all the pay review bodies in all our countries and jurisdictions are able to interpret the evidence and apply a fair increase for everyone. Of course we support this motion. Let's make it unanimous.
Thank you, Dave. Okay, before we vote, just clarify, someone asked if we could make it general to all nations and regions. We already have a standing motion from our last conference, I think, that covers that, and this one is specific to Northern Ireland, so I think it's probably appropriate to leave this one as specific. If you look in your pack, well, if you haven't got a pack, the online version, you'll see there were 38 motions that we actually considered and passed at a policy conference, and one of those was looking at action on pay, so it's already covered. This one, keeping it specific to Northern Ireland, I think is quite useful at this stage. Do I have to ask for a vote on that? A conference content with that? Would you raise your hand if you're content? Okay, is there any discontents? Okay, phew. In which case we'll vote on the motion. For those in favour of this motion, would you raise your hand? And those against? Fantastic, thank you, conference. That's carried unanimously. Now we're going to have a short break. Don't leave the room. In our policy making, to just ask, is Brett Griffin in the room? Brett is the founder and CEO of Pupil Progress, who are one of our sponsors, and he's just going to say a few words about that. Come forward, Brett.
Hopefully someone's going to turn my mic on. Oh, wonderful, you can all hear me. It's my first conference too, I don't know if I'm going to get a clap. Hopefully someone's going to pull up the PowerPoint for me.
Yeah.
We do aim for some comfortable silences in the presentations, but I think this is a bit above and beyond.
Conference, can I just check, can we hear Brett? Can you hear him okay? It's difficult to hear for us, but you can hear okay.
It's allowed me to get a little bit comfortable on stage, maybe. Great. The NHT logo is over the top of the PowerPoint. I don't know if that's going to continue. I'll get going. My name is Brett Griffin. I'm actually the founder of Pupil Progress. I'm really excited to be here today to actually be able to present in front of you all. I want to tell you a little bit about actually my story. I was a former teacher of 12 years. I was an assistant principal for 5 of those, and I really understand what it is to be in a school education system and a school leader. With my experiences as a teacher and a school leader, I really noticed some real issues with the accuracy of data being used to inform my teaching and learning. the delay in being able to share that information with my key stakeholders, and also the real impact of that in the classroom. And that's something that I drove, my motivation came from this experience and drove me to start Pupil Progress as a company. What we have is a common problem in our schools, which is the use of Excel and Google Sheets in order to calculate the working at grade. This is having a huge impact on the data accuracy. Exam boards require really complex calculations, unit weightings, scaling factors, applying grade boundaries to assessments. This is actually linking into what's been previously spoken about, which is additional workload, which teachers shouldn't have to be doing. They should be really paid to be involved with actually teaching and mentoring and supporting learning in the classroom. The second issue is that once we've calculated those grades and we've manually typed them into our trackers, we've then got to do it a second time and upload it into our central management system, which is what we commonly know as the double data entry. This takes a huge volume of time, and as a result of which we then get it into the data manager's hands, and that data manager then has to do another round of work in order to get that into our analytical tools such as CISRA and Formatrix. We know that this takes your schools 2 to 3 weeks per data point. Again, this is a huge waste of teachers' time and school leaders' time, your time, and it's something that we are really, really passionate about solving. So how does Pupil Progress support this? We have created trackers with incredibly high levels of functionality. This means that you don't have to worry about trying to create any formulas or VLOOKUPs. All of that functionality means that teachers now use our trackers instead of Google or Excel. And as a result, it's in one platform, which means it can go directly into your school's central MIS. It can also go directly into any analytical tool that you're using as a school, or better still, we actually have an overview, which means it's in one place. One single point of entry, and what we like to call a single point of truth. Now, why would our teachers and leaders start to use our trackers instead of Google and Excel and those complex tools? Well, we've created trackers that replicate the exam board structure exactly. They will calculate the grade exactly as the exam boards do. That includes taking into consideration any scaling factors or weightings for every single exam board and qualification. You can add and adjust and change your own grade boundaries, which makes it really, really user-friendly. We have the ability to create individual instant student reports. Now, this is something I also want to share from my individual story. Is I actually used this software for 2 years before I left teaching to start Pupil Progress. The change I saw in students' behavior was overwhelming. They had more buy-in, they had more motivation. A really hot topic at the moment is agency, giving students agency. It certainly gave them agency, it gave them control over their own learning. Parents' evening, you could imagine, incredibly focused conversations, incredibly targeted conversations with more efficiency, again, impacting on workload because preparation time for teachers is really, really low, especially when we consider the impact on workload. You can add your own tests. It's customizable. This is an example of a teacher adding a test, tagging questions against specific topic areas. Again, no need to use complex spreadsheets. The next example is actually going to show you the ability to add a past paper that we at Pupil Progress have added for the school with every question tagged against a specific topic area. So not only do you get a grade calculation, not only do you understand what's happening at question level analysis, you now get to see which topic areas you need to go and target as an individual student or across the whole cohort or a particular class. Now, we talked about accuracy and delay. Our trackers are the most accurate trackers available in the education market. We are using, because teachers are using those, they're live, so there is now no delay. And this is actually looking at how we impact on the classroom. So a real example of how a teacher would use this and how a school leader would use this. You can see here an example of a student that has a minimum target grade of a 5. They're working at a grade 2 and they have an average unit grade of a grade 4. Now, for that student to move that to 2 or 5, our system will show your teachers that student needs 42 marks. That's brilliant, but it's even better when we know that it will show you where we can get that 42 mark uplift from. It will also show you which areas of the course we need to work on, so it really, really provides the information that drives your classroom activity. We even have the ability to create bespoke Key Stage 1, 2, and 3 tracking systems, so you as a school can now track progress across key stages for a whole school or for a whole entire trust. Now, where it gets really exciting is for your school middle leaders. They get a breakdown and an instant real-time report functionality. Again, saving teachers time and having to use complex tools with complex filters. Grade distribution against minimum target grade, all traffic lighted, and a complete breakdown of all subgroup analysis, all provided for you, done by us, again, saving huge amounts of time and effort and improving efficiency. It gets even more exciting for you as school leaders because we can create an overview of how students are performing across the whole entire school. Again, traffic lighted against their minimum target grade, so you can see exactly which areas of the school you want to support and target. You can even do a Key Stage 4 grade analysis, which allows you to see the P8 and A8 score for each individual student. What you're actually about to see is the first ever platform for a head teacher or a director of a trust to be able to see the P8 score for your school in real time. And that is something that doesn't exist because currently everyone is bogged down with quite complex data point systems. This allows you to identify the students that you really want to work with. It allows you to see which students that you really, which subject areas you really want to support and target. And it also helps you identify within those subject areas which students need your support and intervention. Most importantly, you are able to take action early. We can see the gaps, we can see which students need support really quickly, and we can intervene in a timely fashion with not this big panic rush towards the end of an exam series. We can even set targets for those key students, and we can, again, do that really proactively. What you're looking at here is a picture of a comparison between where the students are working at now and what you have forecast them. The students in green are the ones meeting your targets. The ones in red are below, and it actually presents how many grades by, and the ones in blue are exceeding their target, again, presenting how many grades by. What I also want to share with you is we are incredibly innovative, and we are a really forward-thinking organisation that wants to stay at the forefront of education. We've got a number of really critical developments coming live very shortly, which is a parent portal coming to us in June. We're also enhancing our analysis tool, making it possible for school leaders to tag your target students and, again, providing further support for your teachers. That's coming in September. We would usually try to cover some form of a case study, but obviously it's a really focused presentation slot. So I do recommend you check our reviews out on the EdTech Impact. We are one of the highest rated reviews, we have the highest rated reviews on their platform currently amongst some 1,600 educational technology softwares. We actually have a really exciting offer for you today. As a sponsor of this event, we are really excited to be able to offer the use of our software for 2 subject areas in its entirety. So for 2 subject areas at 0 cost for the entirety of your NAHT membership, you can access that today or in the next few weeks whenever you feel is appropriate. We really believe in schools being able to trust our software and not just sell you the dream. We want you to be able to get your hands on it and actually test whether it delivers on what you've seen today. Really simply, all you need to do is use the QR code you see here, or you can use the QR code that you see on the leaflets that are in your delegate packs. We welcome any questions out by the food area. I really appreciate your time. Apologies for the start awkwardness, but we got there in the end. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Brett. 1, 2. Thank you, Brett. Thank you. Okay, to let you know what's going on, we are going to use this session to take motions 10 and 11, and then we'll either take one or two of the emergency motions before we break for lunch at 1 o'clock. So we will carry on now with our policy making, and we are on to a section on recruitment and retention, including workload. So we're on motion 10 on qualified teaching status. And the proposer is Chris Kirkham-Knowles. Seconder is Rachel Younger.
Dr. President, Mr. President until August, Conference. Chris Kirkham-Knowles, Chair of the National Executive Professional Committee, representative of Yorkshire Region, and for transparency, I do a part-time job that's not defined in the School Teachers Pay and Conditions document, but I am a school leader. I'm proud to represent such an eclectic mix of professionals from all walks of life who strive to enable young people to thrive. I'm even proud to represent future presidents who wear cowboy boots for gala dinners, and then ask past presidents to remove them with a special tool. I'll leave you to reflect and find out tonight what that might look like. But I'm also interested to see how that was signed by our wonderful colleagues over here, who you must have noticed, but I don't want to go all the conference without giving them a round of applause for their fantastic work. Now, they're going to have to earn that, because I want to see how cowboy boots removed with a special tool by a president would be signed. And forgive me, I was hoping to sort that out with you over dinner, but actually being called to the rostrum early didn't allow me to do it, so forgive me, I owe you a pint later. So anyway, back to this. In the 25 years that I've been a school leader, if you're just going to sign towards me then, I've seen many changes to how schools are led and who is involved. I'm pleased to say that NAHT, in its 125 years of existence, and I needed to read that to make sure I got the date right, has responded to those changes and welcomed members who undertake all different roles within modern school leadership. No longer are we the National Association of Head Teachers. We are now the School Leaders Union. It's in the small print down there, and the apostrophe is in the right place. Now, periodically and regularly, National Executive reviews the policy positions that we hold. These policy positions are what our General Secretary, his team, and our officers negotiate with the DFE and ministers on, those ministers that turn up. This motion may seem a bit odd because it states what you might call the really obvious, or use any other word to describe the obvious. However, it's really important that it gets your support, because it will replace a historical, unrepresentative policy position that is not inclusive and doesn't recognise the breadth of our membership. The policy position, which is easy to say, that this motion replaces is one that states that all school leaders must have qualified teacher status. Now, I can assure you that the wording of this motion has been more carefully scrutinised than Paul Whiteman's response to the government's absence from our conference. The Professional Committee and National Executive are confident that it reflects the complexity of the modern education system in which we work. It affirms other policy positions related to ensuring that teaching is regarded as a profession in line with the law, health, etc., whilst embracing the contribution that to school leadership that school business leaders and others make every day within our organisations. Conference, I urge you to vote in favour of this modernising motion that spring cleans NHT's policy position and ensures that the whole of our membership are valued and can be appropriately recognised and represented in a union demonstrating solidarity to all our members. I also urge you to watch Simon's Feet this evening. Dr. President, Mr. Still President until August, Conference, I move.
Thank you, Chris.
Rachel Younger, School Business Leader, Representative on National Executive and Branch Secretary in Blackpool. I believe the best school leadership is a team effort where each person brings their various skills, experience and knowledge to the table, whether that is in one school or a group of schools, in whatever form that group of schools takes. In that team, we become greater than the sum of our parts. And I too was going to mention that we'd changed the strapline for NAHT recently. We are the School Leaders Union. And around 15 years ago, NAHT's constitution was updated to allow school business leaders to become members because it had been recognised at that point that we are school leaders. We are all school leaders. So what we're asking today is to update a line in our big book of policy positions to reflect what is already happening in practice across the country and within our union. Comrades, I second this motion.
Thank you, Rachel. Do we have anybody else wishing to speak on the 2-minute mic? We do.
Claire Evans, West Midlands. I really don't like disagreeing with anyone at HT because I love all of you and I think you're all amazing. But there are parts of this motion that I don't agree with, and I felt that I do need to say something. I agree with what has been said. School business managers are school leaders. I have a school business manager. She's amazing. She's a member of SLT. She attends all SLT meetings and she is part of the senior leadership team. I agree with that. But she would not be best placed to lead a school because she does not have the understanding and the pedagogy of education. And I firmly believe you get that from being a teacher. So I don't agree with this motion.
Thank you, Claire. Have we got another person for the 2-minute mic? We have. Keep coming.
That is a long walk, actually. I'm Carla Whelan. I'm with West Midlands. This is my first conference. And I didn't even know that you could do this, so this is a very quick collection of thoughts, but I truly believe that understanding a child's development and how a child's mind works is crucial. Understanding the pedagogy and the qualifications needs recognition, value and respect. A qualified teacher understands the mechanics at many levels. And what are we saying if we say that leaders do not need this? And what is that message? So I see that the profession needs to be seen differently so as we can move forward in the future. And I felt I needed to say that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Keith Wright, North West National Executive. I have worked with an eclectic group of professionals, and his name is Chris Kirkham-Knowles. The reality is, though, that I'm a head teacher and have been for 16 years in various settings, small school, federation, large schools. And I would say I don't think I could do my job effectively without a really effective business manager in each. They're worth their weight in gold. I would have made some really difficult decisions. I have had to make some really difficult decisions. I've done a number of staffing reviews, I'm sure we all have. But I need that right-hand person with me to help me make those decisions. And I would say I'm a convert, really, thinking that we do need to think outside the box now about what we stand for as a union and the concept of leaders, plural, and that leadership of a setting is a collaboration. And yes, I recognise the importance of qualified teacher status, but also recognise sound, prudent consultation in decision making, because I'm not an accountant. I don't have those skills. I have a number of skills, and some of which I pursue and some which I find. But I've earned them over time, and so have they. And together, I think it's what helps make our schools and settings the effective place. So I would support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris Knowles, you will have a right of reply if you wish to exercise it at the end of this.
Tim Gallagher, West Midlands. Round about the time that we accepted bursars and the like into business managers and the like into our union, I went to Hong Kong. I went to a very forward-thinking school, through school, 3 to 18. The head teacher had qualified status. The bursar was an accountant, a business manager was an accountant. The pastoral lead was a psychologist, and you get the idea. The team was made of experts, but it was run by someone qualified as a teacher. I think when it comes to making decisions about where you put your money, where you put your plans, where you put your vision of the school, you need to have it from the background of being a teacher. I cannot support this motion.
Thank you, Tim. Nice to have some debate, isn't it?
Amy Lassman, West Midlands. I'd like to reiterate some of the points again against this motion. While I support absolute school business managers, bursars, all of these people are school leaders and vital. I rely really heavily on my school for financial support. They're part of the team. They have a place in the union as leaders. But my main point is a school, a trust, whatever it is not a business. We need business support. But as Tim just said, those decisions about what we do, what our vision is for our school, depends on that training, that professional status, and I think that we should do nothing to undervalue that or undermine that. So I'm afraid I can't support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dave Woods, Ealing Branch, London Region, and National Exec. I think the key thing for me in this motion is the first few sentences. We are not saying that people making decisions about learning or pedagogy should not have qualified teacher status. That is a given. We can all agree with that. What we're saying here is that the structure of many of our schools now has become complex. That's a whole different debate. But what we're saying is that those complex structures now sometimes have people in leadership roles who have got their best experience from fields other than having qualified teacher status. In my own branch, when we first accepted school business leaders into membership, we had debates and arguments, people on both sides. Those arguments are now over because we all see the many benefits that school business leaders bring. At National Executive, as Chris outlined earlier, we've debated, we've discussed, we had great conversation, and we reached this motion. I would urge you to support this motion. This motion is about bringing a refresh to the way in which all our leadership roles have. And isn't it good, though, colleagues, to have some debate over a motion? It's what we always want, to have two sides. So do make your own decision, but I would urge you to support the motion.
Thank you, Dave.
Michael Tidd, West Sussex, and if I'd have thought I was coming up to talk, I'd have worn something different. I said yesterday at dinner as well that I wanted a bit of debate on something. I said next year I might put something radical in that's ridiculous to have a bit of debate. I didn't expect it from this because I read this and I thought, yeah, that makes sense. And I tweeted about half an hour ago how important it is that we've got business leaders here to make comments like the 3-year budget planning to Bridget Phillipson, because I'm a head teacher in a school and I spend all my time saying I want to be able to focus on teaching and learning and not deal with all this other stuff. And I want a really good business leadership team to be able to do that stuff for me. And I can't imagine why we wouldn't want to appreciate that. So if you're opposing this, I really want to know from the people opposing what it is we're opposing. And that, so lots of people said I can't agree with all of it. Every sentence I read, I think that makes sense. I want the person who's absolutely in charge of teaching and learning to be able to focus on that. but I want school leadership to be able to make sure we do the best things for our schools. And the 3-year budget planning and worrying about where the bits of money are coming from the government is really tedious and not a good use of my time. I think we want those people to be part of that, and I think we saw this morning how important it is. So I really support this motion. I think if we're going to change it, we want to look at what's different, but it can't just be opposed, hopefully. So I'll support. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Andy Meller. I'm the Blackpool Branch President, National Executive, and also a member of the School Business Leaders Sector Council. Don't you just hate it when somebody just comes up and steals your thunder before you're about to speak? I think this motion is really carefully nuanced, and I think it's very self-explanatory. I find myself in a very strange position where I'm looking at people who want to lead big organisations, big collaborative structures, huge multi-academy trusts. And I find myself saying, do they really have to do a PGCE and then ignore it to be able to run their collaborative trusts? You know, at the end of the day, the skill set that some school business leaders have, and there are some of them running MATs now who are our members who are out there. What message are we giving them? Are we saying this is not the union for them? Please, I urge you to support this motion.
Thank you, Andy. Just going to say, after the last person who joins the line, I think making their way, we're going to close the line so we can get through. Oh, no, we'll close the line now, so we're just going to hear those that are standing in the queue. Thank you.
Nikki Smith, President, Bath and North East Somerset, now back with a smile on my face. I would like to thank the Executive for bringing this back, because I'm very aware that a similar motion was defeated in October. And I've just sat with my colleague and read and reread this. And I think we need to really recognise how much the Executive have worked to change the wording. And I think we need to be very aware that whilst we agree or we disagree with academies and LAs, we need to welcome members who don't necessarily have QTS but are doing a really difficult job and support us all the way. I really strongly support this motion.
Thank you very much.
Clem Cody, Cumbria Branch. Those that know me know I can have a really good heated debate in an empty room. So it's been quite refreshing listening to the debate going on this motion, and I'm hopeful that Chris will clarify the points, because I seem to be a bit confused as to what we're voting on. For me, the wording's quite clear. That we're asking that the educational decisions are informed by the professionals who are qualified to make those decisions. And that should be the premise of our voting, that we shouldn't remove that right. And I don't think my understanding of this motion is that what we're asking to do. We're not asking for that to be removed. We're asking for that to be key. So I'm hopeful of good clarification, Chris.
Thank you, Clem.
Graham Frost, Cumbria Branch and National Exec. I think there may be some other issues that we might have to take up outside of this, such as, take, for example, my experience with regards to school business management. My first school, I was the school business manager, as well as the head teacher, as well as the caretaker, as well as occasional cleaner, etc., etc. So, small school heads, solidarity with you today. I now find myself in a position where I no longer stay awake worrying about getting all of the policies up to speed, the health and safety considerations, finance, keeping on top of that on every level. Still have strategic oversight, but nonetheless that's delegated now to a very, very capable school business manager who does not have qualified teacher status and, in my view, does not need it. So I think I'm passionate about schools being led by educational professionals, absolutely, but I wholeheartedly support the way that this very nuanced motion has been put forward, and I do urge you to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham.
Kevin Burnett, Bath and North East Somerset. I may have been reading this slightly wrong, but for what it's worth, I'd like to provide you with my interpretation. And I have nothing against the valuable input and the skill sets of those people who work within school leadership teams, whether they be business leaders or anyone else. I think where I'm coming from is the fact that the overall decision maker needs to be somebody with QTS. And why I say that is that we all see the world through different lenses. And at the moment, in my SACRA role, we talk about worldviews and each person's lens. And no matter whatever you're looking at, if you're the person making the final decision, then your lens should be educational. And your background and your experience and your information that you get should be that. How many times have we complained that the Secretaries of State have no idea about education and that they need to be educational professionals? So from my point of view, is the overall bit, I'm afraid, that the leader making that final decision needs to be QTS. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.
Hello. As you know, I'm a school business leader because I mentioned it earlier. I am fully in support of this motion. I am an educational professional. My lens is nothing but about education. But actually, schools are collaborative organisations. No decision is made without the appropriate educational input. The other thing that I did want to say is that as well as being a school business leader, I'm a governor within a multi-academy trust for an amazing primary school in Bracknell. That multi-academy trust has benefited for a number of years from an inspirational educational leader with QTS, but she is retiring. So our new chief executive is actually the CFO of the trust. I don't for one moment believe that his appointment from the position of CFO to chief executive will undermine in any way the excellent pedagogical decisions which will be made, the fact that people with QTS will make those educational decisions. But you know what? He's going to be running a fast-growing trust with about 10 different schools in it. And actually, I think he probably is a good person to be running that trust. And I wouldn't want him to feel that he couldn't come here and be a part of this union and share his experiences and his understanding. I thoroughly believe that he is an educational professional and his lens would be nothing beyond being about education. Thank you. I'm fully in support of this motion.
Thank you.
John Barr from Bristol. It's with a heavy heart I stand here because I retired from my 20 years of head teaching in the last summer, and I have to say the arrival of the financial expertise into education across those 2 decades was so welcome. And my opposition, I'm afraid, to this motion is not about individuals or situations. I'm afraid it's about the middle sentence in the middle, if you want to know what the problem is, the one that begins however, because I'm afraid to say, and it is a reflection of the chaotic and diverse system we unfortunately are working in, but I see, I'm afraid, and in Academy Trust, I won't name them, but I see it in the landscape, I see them creating big central teams. And I see some of that happening, I'm afraid, in Academy Trust that are not led by people with QTS. I see, I'm afraid to say, sometimes what I guess in a large Academy Trust could be called the middle tier. Head teachers taking accountability, responsibility when Ofsteds don't quite go right and losing their jobs. And CEOs with QTS or sometimes not. And I think, unfortunately, and I really regret saying it, I oppose this motion because, unfortunately, it does not. However, we recognise that, no, I'm afraid I stand by it. I want, if the buck stops, which in theory in the English system it does with the CEO, that person needs QTS. That's why I stand today. With regret, I oppose.
Thank you, John. Chris, you have a right of reply.
Great. How long do I have?
3 minutes.
3? Ooh, right, okay. Lunch everybody afterwards, I promise. if that doesn't reflect what happened at National Executive and Professional Committee, which is the committee I chair, I couldn't think of any better reflection of it. That was exactly the debate that we had. There's a message for government here, which is quite strong, really. Two things, really. The first one is don't duck the big issues. Okay, this is a big issue for us because it means a lot. And it means a lot to minority groups within our organisation. And it needs careful thought. So since October, more detailed thought's gone into it, and greater brains than mine put the nuances in to try to inform in more detail. The second thing is don't try to throw a dead cat in, even if it is the Vice President's crocodile shoes, because clearly that won't work entirely. So government, please take note. The other issue for me, there are various things in this. We have a union led by somebody who doesn't have QTS. Does that bother anybody? No. Okay, he's well informed when it comes to all the issues surrounding education. You don't, do you, Paul? So that's the second dead cat, you spotted it. I think the important bit here, and it is about the detail in this, the however was the crucial bit for me in terms of it. The wording around it is really, really carefully crafted. But I want colleagues to really look at it from the perspective of the majority of cases. We can all find, with all of our policies, exceptions. We can all find exceptions to any policies we might have. And it's really important that our team who are negotiating and representing our membership and recognising our membership for with the range that it's got can actually do that from a point of view of the majority, but also be set up to be able to assist those who are in minority positions or the extremes. Many people making their arguments referred to school business leaders as part of their leadership team. Now, that's something that we debated quite strongly and in detail. It's very difficult to recognise somebody in your leadership team and as a member of NAHT, but actually technically, according to our policy as we've currently got it, they can't be represented fully because they're not recognised, because they don't have the qualification. And so that's the major issue for me in terms of why this has bounced around so much. And I celebrate it, I think it's fantastic. But the wording that we generated after much thought was to try to acknowledge the fact, and I think it was Tim who with his wisdom said, it's really important that people with an educational background, the word pedagogy we use, all of those aspects of it are included within the wording at the front end of this. And also, the key part of it for me is that it says all educational decisions are informed by professionals with the relevant qualifications and experience, QTS. Now, in summary then, because I've only got 3 minutes and I really don't want to revisit the last 4 or 5 months of my life, if it looks like a school leader, it acts like a school leader, it's called a school leader, we as a union must recognise them as school leaders.
Thank you, Chris.
Conference, I move.
So we will put this to vote. And if it is too close to call, we will engage our tellers to come and count hands. Okay? So then, conference, can I please raise your hand, those in favour of this motion? Thank you. Thank you. And those against? It's too close to call, folks. We're going to have to engage our tellers. I will just take some instruction about what that means.
So, when the... Am I on? Hello? Hello, yeah. When the President asks for those in favour again, if you could just raise your hands and keep your hands raised, and we will have a number of people counting those raised hands in the auditorium, and then he'll ask you to put those hands down, and then there'll be raised hands for people voting against, and we'll do a similar thing. We'll tot up the numbers and we'll give you the results as soon as we can.
It's like voting for which video to watch at the end of the term, isn't it? Right. If you are for this motion? Would you please raise your hand and wait to be counted? Thank you. Just checking with the tellers whether all votes have been counted. We've counted all of the 4 votes. Could we now see, raise your hand, those against, please? Okay, you can put your hands down now before you pass out. Folks, it's democracy. It's what we're here for. And so we're just looking at what that means now. And I'll get back to you in a few seconds. Okay, so the votes for the motion, there were 81, and the votes against was 79.
Paul.
Paul.
Can we encourage them to have a card vote? Okay.
Okay. It's very close. We can have a card vote if it's called for. That requires 50 people to stand in their chairs, and that's where the... Oh, sorry?
Stand up, yes.
Stand up, yeah.
50 people to stand up.
Don't get
not
on your
their
chair. We don't want any health and safety. And this is where the delegation from your branch comes into effect. So we will have a count to see if we've got 50 people in their chairs, and we'll take a card vote. Oh, we have to lock the doors. Do I say that? Don't leave the room. Okay, we are locking the doors now as well, so nobody allows. And this is part of the procedure, apparently. We're locking the doors and making sure no one else can come in now we've called that. If we've got 50 people standing, we'll be moving to a card vote. We do have enough people for a card vote, so sit down while we work out what that means. What do we do now?
Okay, so the doors are now locked, so you can't go anywhere until we get this done. So what you should have in your possession, each branch represented here should have a piece of paper with the branch name and the number of delegates that you are representing here today. If you haven't got, if one of your branch has not got their card vote, can you please see your regional secretary, who should have the cards. So just explain what we're going to be doing. We are going to re-vote, and one representative of the branch will have the card vote in their hand. And if you're in favour, if your branch is in favour of that vote, hold that up and we will collect that in. Similarly for those against, and then we will take those 2 piles away. We will add up the number of delegates that you're representing, and then we will give you a result.
We'll do that after lunch.
Yeah. Can you cut? If you have a question, can you come up to the rostrum, please?
Yeah. Yeah. Flip the coin.
Yeah.
What happens if the branches, someone's come up to the question and you disagree? Yeah.
To East Wales Derbyshire branch, we've got our branch here, we've got the region here, we've got one region where the branch hasn't attended, so there are no attendees from the branch, and within the Derbyshire branch we've got a split decision.
Yeah.
What's the procedure?
We're just checking that with our expert Magnus. If your branch, if there are two of you from the branch and you are disagreeing, we're working out what that means. Okay. Okay, you might want to listen to this. If branches are split, yeah, Magnus is going to just get control, so can you listen to Magnus, please, in case you've got the situation where you've got a split branch.
Okay, so if you have a split branch, you have to vote one way or the other, or you have to abstain. So you will need to sort it out between the members of the branch delegation. So that one's clear. It's becoming apparent that some people are have not got their cards in the room, either because they haven't been given them or because they've mislaid them or left them in their room. I'm just going to have a quick conversation with the President to see what we do about that.
I'll get the General Secretary involved. Thank you. Conference. I'm going to ask our General Secretary, this is how we're going to proceed, because we've got a number of people who've left cards back in rooms, and we want to make sure this is fair. So our General Secretary is going to explain a few things, and then we're going to proceed from there. Thank you, Paul.
Conference, how exciting. A real trade union working for a card vote. So look, just what I wanted to remind everybody really, because it's the first one of these that we've had for a while. In fact, some of the conversation going on at the moment is, have we ever done this before in terms of having a card vote? You're here in theory as delegates for your branch. That's why you exercise the opinion of the branch. Now, what we normally get through is a show of hands, and that works quite properly. So you do have to exercise the decision amongst the branch with some care and with some diligence, because you will be responsible for explaining why you voted in a certain way to your branch when you go back. You're accountable to your branch for what you've done. So what the President's just decided is that we will break for lunch, so that amongst your branches you've got time for some conversation to establish whether you're for or against the motion. If you can't resolve the difference between the branch, then the only way forward really is to abstain, because you don't have a full branch position that you can account for back at the ranch. And during the period while we've closed down, those of you that have left your card votes in your rooms, dash back and get them, or come and see Magnus and we'll sort those out. Then when we come back, we'll lock the doors again and we'll go through the process of taking a card vote. Sorry?
But no further debate.
Oh, yeah, that's the other thing. There can be no further debate from the rostrum. It's just within your branches determining which way you want to vote. All good?
Thank you. Thank you, Paul.
Can I just say one other thing?
Just going to Magnus for one point of order.
Can I just say one further thing, and that's if a branch is unrepresented, you can't vote on behalf of another branch. So it's only the branches that are represented in this room that we would expect to see card votes from. Thank you.
Okay, I hope that's clear. So we're listen, folks. We've had an interesting morning, haven't we? We've had a roller coaster of emotion. We've been brought to tears. We've been made to laugh. And now we've got to the point in our democracy where we're making some hard decisions. So we are taking the time over lunch to get those cards, make sure the branches here are represented, and you've worked out how you want to vote or if you're going to abstain. What I'm going to do then is I'm going to break for lunch, and we will return here at the planned time of 1:45. So we've just got a slightly longer break. Chris Kirkham, Knowles. Sorry. Yeah. I'll hand over to...
I think you just...
Yeah, I'll hand over to Paul.
I don't know.
Beyond me, Chris.
Who said it was a good idea to become a trade union? Chris, I don't think there's a technical answer to that. I don't think it's in our rules, and I'm not sure it's in the procedures that normally guide us. I think what we're doing here is trying to find a pragmatic and fair way through a situation where we're doing something that hasn't happened for a long time. So all I can really call for is for people to conduct themselves properly. Talk within your branches rather than trying to get round branches, because it's for branches trying to resolve their position right now rather than continuing the debate outside the room. Now, we can't police that, but you're professionals. You do act with integrity and you do act with honesty, in contrast to some other areas of the country, and I'd like you to display that today and to get to the bottom of this amongst your branches and come back and vote.
Thank you, Paul. So, conference, we'll see you back here at 1:45.
I think the biggest challenge I've probably found is not being around and not seeing or being able to identify with other leaders that look like me. I think that's been one of the biggest challenges that I've found. In particular, this has probably made me consider whether being a leader or getting to the place where I'm at now was achievable.
Prior to being in the network, I might attend a course or a meeting and just glance around the room and think, oh gosh, I'm the only non-white person here or person of colour. And then I would just sort of push that thought to the back of my mind and think, well, it doesn't matter, you know, why are you worrying about that? But by being in a network, it's almost like being in a virtual conference or meeting where everybody is of colour.
Sometimes when you start this journey, you just have to be brave, you just have to step forward and you just have to take the risk or whatever. And I think it's been easier knowing that I'm part of a group, even if I'm not contributing a lot to the group all the time, but just keeping an eye on what's happening. And I'm hearing a very different commentary on experiences from the BAME WhatsApp feed.
Just that it's been such an eye-opening kind of learning curve, because I didn't realise a group like this existed, and I didn't realise that other senior leaders felt the same way I did.
Gives me courage to tackle what can be quite sensitive issues. It allows me to sort of run through ideas with other people in the group and saying, you know, I'm thinking of doing this in my school. It gives me confidence.
We are on our way already irreversibly towards a culture that is going to look very, very different from 35, 40 years ago, and the sorts of ways that race and ethnicity were talked about.
Eventually we have kids in school looking up to a diverse leadership team, which is what they should see. And therefore the expectation of our younger generation will be that there will be a mixed ethnic bag at the top.